after dawn. The Reverend had dozed against the window while Florence sat straight beside him in miserable anticipation, her stockinged knees thick lumps under her skirt, and drummed her heels against one another to keep blood moving in her feet. They'd changed trains again in Springfield, in a station astringent with the smell of urine even in the chilly weather. A filthy boy had tried to lift Florence's purse and cried when she shoved him back, and Florence had thought, "Nobody is getting what he wants today." Despite the cold, she had taken off her gloves and spent the last hour of the journey picking at the base of her left thumbnail until it bled, an old bad habit to keep panic at bay. Even in the dim light of the anteroom now, she could see a brown dapple on the green fabric of her glove. Mrs. Meade opened the office door herself. A sturdy, older woman in a black gabardine dress and a starched blouse with a fringed laced collar that nearly touched her prominent ears. Her gaze was clear and cold. She couldn't have been more different from delicate Mrs. Ward, who had been the college's president in Florence's time. Florence remembered waiting outside Mrs. Ward's office on a sunny May morning, preparing to make her apologies for her departure from Mount Holyoke after only 1 year. She had blamed her mother's poor health, and Mrs. Ward, a trusting soul, had been most understanding. "Miss Mellish, Reverend Mellish, come in," Mrs. Meade said, shortly, and waited for Florence to settle her father in a chair. "I am very sorry for your distress. I will tell you all I know." There wasn't much to tell, and Mrs. Meade made short work of it. She described the dragging of the lakes and the teams of searchers in the woods. Men were walking the banks of the Connecticut River in case Bertha had gone out on one of her long hikes alone and tumbled in. The police were finding a cannon to fire over the water to raise the corpse with the force of its concussion. Mrs. Meade said the corpse quite calmly, with no gulping or quavering. "Of course," she added, and here she seemed to warm the way an iron warms in fire. "There is still reason to hope that she has not drowned, that we will find her alive soon." As they exited the building, the crisp air forced a gasp from Florence's lungs. It was not a sob. She would not allow that. Her father tugged at her elbow. "I want to look over the campus," the Reverend said, his gaze tracking up Prospect Hill, the promontory that stretched along the college's eastern border. From there, you could command a view toward both Upper and Lower Lake, surveying the manicured trees and impressive structures of the freshly expanded campus. She knew what he wanted. He was hungry to discern Bertha camouflaged like a dryad among those trees and buildings. Desperate to search her out, drag her away from the college, just as Florence had once been dragged away. "She's not here," she whispered, knowing he wouldn't hear. But it was easier to obey than to argue most of the time. They made their slow way to the bridge across the brook at Lower Lake, and with each step, Florence heard Mrs. Meade's voice. The corpse, she thought. The corpse. Even in her time at the school, they told the story of the Lady of Lower Lake, a senior so distraught over her failing grades that she'd flung herself to a hanging death from this bridge while stabbing a dagger into her own heart. As a young woman, Florence had thought this tale comically baroque, especially its ending. The voice of the dead girl echoing from beneath the bridge when a classmate crossed it. "Help me," the girl had cried. "I'm down here," while her body cooled in the pond water. As they crossed the bridge now, Florence felt as if her whole body had opened wide like the bell of an ear trumpet, attuned to every sound. A kind of listening that stalled the breath. Once, Florence had been practiced at this kind of listening. She had imagined, more than once, how Bertha would sound when pleading for help, and what she would do to rescue Bertha. She'd spent the train ride from Killingly rehearsing those visions in new detail. Over and over, she'd enfolded that imaginary Bertha in her arms, smelled the grassy tang of sweat along her hairline, squeezed her fierce little body, and in every fantasy, Bertha would finally struggle free of Florence's arms and pat Florence's cheek and smile, just as she had as a baby. But no sounds came from below the bridge. Just absence, Bertha's absence, echoing. Florence's father was a husk beside her. He clung to her round arm and puffed weak steam into the air.